What's up guys? In today's video we're going to be installing the glass into the back of my Miata's hardtop. So what we're going to need to do for that is we're going to need to clean up the outside edge where the weather stripping was previously adhered, get that a nice clean surface so the new weather stripping will adhere to it, and then we're going to stick down the new weather stripping around the outside, lay down the urethane that actually holds the glass into the top, and then run the trim around the outside that makes it look pretty. So let's get started. Alright, so to get started, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take an old microfiber rag and some Goo Gone, and we're just going to run around the outside surface of this and clean up as much of this residue as we can. It's not going to be perfect, but the goal is to get it pretty well clean. That way we have a nice surface for the weather stripping to adhere to. Okay, now that we've gone around the whole outside of the window with the Goo Gone and cleaned up a pretty good amount of the residue, we're gonna go ahead and install the weather strip around the outside edge. So this is the weather strip, and I ordered it straight from Mazda. It was about 15 bucks from them, I believe. And it's pretty much just a 1/4 inch square with a adhesive back on one side. So on my window here, I can see the line that goes around the outside where the original weather stripping was. So I'm just gonna follow that as best as I can. And it's also important to note that where you stop and start is where there's going to be one seam around there. Otherwise, it'll be a continuous loop. But we do want to put that seam at the very bottom edge of the window, which is this side for me. So that way, if any moisture tries to get in, it won't be able to come in through any other edges. It'll just have to leak out at the bottom there. So let's go ahead and install this. And now just to show you a little bit closer, I've got the weather stripping all stuck down around the outside edge of the window. So I just went right on the inside line of where the bolts mount, and I left about a 1/2 inch or so around the outside here so that I can stick the urethane down in that spot. And then where I started over here, I had a little extra, so what I did is I just overlapped it. I may come back here and trim this down a little bit later, but it shouldn't be really in the way, and she may be able to see it either, so I might just leave it like that. So there we go. Next step is going to be installing the urethane onto it. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do before we get to the urethane is I'm going to lay down a sheet over this comforter that I don't really care if I get any of the urethane onto it. This sheet right here is just sitting on top of my dining room table, and I laid it down so that I don't scratch the glass and I can move it around and work with it really easily, but I don't necessarily want to get the urethane onto this. So I'm just going to lay another sheet down over the top of this, set the glass back on here, and then we'll get ready to lay the urethane down. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to take my 3M windo-weld 8609 and I'm going to heat it up a little bit because this stuff is very, very viscous, and it's going to be kind of difficult to squirt out of the caulking gun if it's cold or maybe about room temperature. So I'm just going to take my heat gun and kind of warm it up a little bit. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get this ready to put into the caulking gun. So first off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the back cap off of this, just like that. Grab my caulking gun and try to squeeze it in there somehow. There we go. Okay. Next, I'm going to go ahead and poke my hole at the end of here. I'm just going to use a screw. We want as big of a hole there as we can get because, like I said, this stuff is very viscous, so it's going to be pretty difficult to squeeze out of there with a really small hole. Alright, I think that's good enough. I'll screw on my tip here. And then I'm gonna cut the tip. All right, now what you wanna do is you wanna cut kind of a V shape at the end of this tip. That'll give you a nice little pyramid of adhesive to go around the outside of the window. Something like that should work pretty well. Okay, so that's what we got there with our tip. Kind of cut at a little bit of an angle there. We're gonna go ahead and try to squeeze some out here. There we go. Now I'm gonna demonstrate here what I'm gonna be doing on the window. I'm gonna have this almost as straight up as I can, squeeze some out, and then we're gonna get a nice triangular bead there, just like you see there. So go ahead and replicate that on the window and we should be good. Okay, and now as carefully as I can, I'm going to try to place the back window into the hardtop. I also already prepped the outside edge of this hardtop, doing the same exact thing that I did to the glass. So, here goes nothing. Now on Miata hardtops, they've got 6 bolts, 3 on each side. All I did to set the glass window in was to line up those 6 bolts. I kind of started with the driver's side over here and then kind of worked over to the passenger side. I had a little bit of urethane on my hand, so I've got a little stuck to the glass window there, so I'm gonna go ahead and try to clean that up as quick as I can. That way it doesn't stay on the glass. Okay, and now we can go ahead and start to install the outer trim that goes around. I ordered this straight from Mazda as well. This was about 55 bucks, I believe. The piece that I ordered actually comes with the little merge piece, the little bridge piece that goes at the very top in the center. I also ordered it separately, which is about 6 bucks, but if you're ordering it yourself, just know that you probably don't need to order this little piece separately. Now the window trim has 2 different sides. You see if you can kind of see it up close there. It's got a thicker, shorter side on this side and then a longer, thinner side on this side here. And what we're gonna do is put the glass in this edge over here and try to get it to sit into there. Now since we already have the urethane in there, it's gonna kind of help hold the trim in place. So it shouldn't be too bad, but I also do have masking tape to hold the trim in place as we're going around if it starts to kind of come out of place. So the way I'm going to go about this is I'm going to kind of lay it out roughly about how it lays down on the top, kind of get it up here. That way I'm not fighting it the whole way, trying to be all twisted and stuff. And what you're going to probably want to do is mark out where your center is. If you buy the trim straight from OEM, from Mazda, there are a couple little notches cut out in it, and those line up with little notches on the outside frame of the OEM hardtop. So I'm going to kind of go off of that and kind of start there to get my exact middle position lined up. So I'm just going to kind of roughly set it up in here. And that kind of tells me, okay, so my middle should be about at this point right here. Might have to kind of push it up to kind of get that little plastic clip to start it first. And then after that, we should be able to just kind of press it into place around the edge. I do also want to note that I've tested this a couple times to make sure that the trim and the window fit all around like they're supposed to. And so it also kind of helps give the trim some memory of the shape. So it's a little bit easier to slot into place when you go to put it in. Yeah, so I didn't quite have it lined up there, so I'm just going to kind of pop it out of place and slide it down a little bit to keep up that slack. There we go. There, now it sits flush around that little notch. And then after I get the trim installed here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my fender washers and nuts on the 6 bolts from the inside. That'll kind of help clamp everything together and hold it in place while it cures. Now the 3M window weld, that part number there has about a 12-hour cure time, 12-hour drive away time is what they say. It's got about 10-15 minutes working time, so it should still be pretty soft and malleable. Now if the window was placed incorrectly, you could pop it out and realign it if you had to. This might be kind of tricky because this join piece has to slot the two ends of the trim together. So what you gotta do is you gotta try to shove it in there as best as you can. I'm gonna go ahead and trim the little corners off of this to try to give me a little bit easier time to install this. I'm just taking off a tiny little chunk off the corners there to try to help it slot into place a little bit easier. I'm just gonna go kind of back around once over and kind of make sure that I wipe off some of that urethane residue around the edge so it doesn't stay on there, and make sure that the seal is seated down all the way around the window. And then the last step I'm going to do is install the nuts with the fender washers. Now these I just picked up at the local hardware store, and they're M5 by 0.8 thread. So then I got some bigger fender washers to make up to the gap around on the actual fiberglass tabs of the top, sorry. I'm gonna place the fender washer on there and then just get the nuts started for now at least. Okay, and there we go. That's the finished product right there, the OEM glass installed into the OEM hardtop. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back around and snug these bolts up just a little bit. I mean, it is glass, so you don't want to tighten it too tight there. I'm just going to give them a little bit of pressure to kind of squeeze some of that urethane out and make sure it gets a good seal all the way around.